Hey everyone, it's Arfan here with Grow Scale, and I am back with another expert guest interview, and I'm super excited. I have Miss Phyllis Jenkins with me today, and I am super excited because first of all, she's a story and book coach, as well as you could add a whole bunch of other stuff to the title. I'll let her do that in a second. But Phyllis, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to have you here.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So if you've listened to any of my guest interviews before, it's just we're having just a casual conversation, ideally to just kind of help the community out. Whether you're a new entrepreneur or existing entrepreneur or growing entrepreneur, we all face challenges along the way. We all go through things, and hearing these stories of others who have gone through the journey of for who potentially have gone from an employee to building an entrepreneur business along different ways, and just a number of things can help a lot. And my early journeys helped me. So I put the show to help others too as well. So without further ado, I would love to turn the mic over to Phyllis and have her give herself an introduction. So please let us know who you are, how you got into this work you're doing, and also what you're going to be talking to us about today.
Absolutely. I am Phyllis Jenkins, and I am in the Plano, Texas area, which is north of Dallas. And
Oh,
I am a wife of 46 years. I married my college
mm,
sweetheart, who
that
introduces
is
me
awesome.
he introduces me as the sugar in his Kool-Aid. And so I'm still in that from him and reversing it. We have two adult daughters, three amazing grandchildren,
Mm,
and one grand dog. So, um, as far as how I started my business, it was through a wake-up call that I
mm.
had, where the doctor walked into the room and he said, "Mrs. Jenkins, you are lucky to be alive." Well,
Oh, wow.
I knew that I was blessed to be alive. And he went on to say that his patient in the other room was not going to make it.
Mm,
And after spending 5 days in the hospital battling a pulmonary embolism, which is blood clots in both of my lungs, I
mm,
left there still echoing what he said in my mind: "You are lucky to be alive." And so
hmm
I went home and prayed, "God, you took her, but you left me here. What more is there for me to do? What more do you
hmm
have for me to do?" And so I set out on a journey to discover my God assignment, which ended up being the powerful journey. And that's how I launched the powerful journey, where we help women and a few men tell their
hmm
stories, write their books, and build a profitable brand around both.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I can't imagine that must have been easy during that time to even we tell the story, we can reflect back and it comes out with ease, but going through it, it's one of those things where your world got turned upside down, I can imagine.
Absolutely, because one day I'm fine, and the next day I'm in the hospital battling
Hmm
a pulmonary embolism and hearing from from the doctor, the specialist,
Yeah.
that you are lucky to be alive.
Yeah. So this I could definitely tell it was a life-changing moment because it then started you on your next path of your journey, which is really
Yes.
helping those to and the topic you've been talking to us about today is really just how to turn your life challenges into a life-changing message, which I love this so much because I feel like a lot of times when we think about, hey, why we're starting a business, there's the money factor. A lot of times we're like, hey, I want to make X amount so I can leave my job, I can take my family, do things like that. But there's also a bigger reason behind it. There's like a why behind it. And it's one of those things where I believe that when we focus more on that why and why we're doing it, the money comes because now we're pouring our heart into that. And so I could definitely see that to be true. And when I was obviously researching you and before we had this interview and looking at this, I was like, oh, okay, I can see her heart is in this business. This is
My
not just
heart
something
is,
to do.
you're absolutely correct. My heart is definitely here. I know that this is my God assignment. This is why I am here. But I also give back to the community by giving each year. I do an annual scholarship to a single mom of a special needs child, helping her to
Mm,
go through college, as well as we give scholarships to a graduating high school senior. And this year, we've already given 3 scholarships. So
That's
I'm super
awesome.
excited about that. So that's connected to my why is my outreach as well.
I love that. That's so impactful because those lives are forever changed. Just from this moment on, it's for a positive and much better future. So I love that so much. So I find it super interesting when we talk about turning life challenges into a life-changing message or messages. And one of the reasons why is because I feel there's so many people who've gone through things like this, and they kind of somewhat get a little bit stuck in terms of like knowing how to tell a story or to bring into fruition, or even realizing that your story and your mess, quote unquote mess or journey or hardship or challenge is so helpful to other people, right? So if there's, listeners right now is thinking like, wow, I've gone through some things, but I never thought about, turn into a life-changing message. What kind of advice would you have for them, or the direction to guide them in?
First of all, I say don't take your story to the grave. When we pass cemeteries, there are so many stories
Mm,
buried that could
wow.
have come and helped someone else that's going through what they went through. And so, to that person who is watching or listening today, if God has brought you through it, it's time for you to reach out and help someone else who is still stuck back
Mm,
where you were. And so your story becomes a lifeline, turning that story, that life challenge into a life changing message brings hope, inspiration,
hmm
encouragement to someone else who thought they were the only person going through that particular
mm,
situation. And I've seen
hmm
that over and over and over again, and have received testimonials of people that said, "Oh my goodness, I thought I was the only one who experienced this." And
hmm
so your story goes out, gives that person a big hug and say, "Let me tell you what God did for me. And if he did it for me, he can do it for you. And let me tell you how he did it." So you are
hmm
actually helping someone else.
I love that you mentioned that. That is like you just reach out and give it a big hug, because so many times we feel alone in our journeys, and even sharing it and realize there's other people that have gone through the same thing kind of gives that sense of like relief, almost, so to say. Not relief that I'm glad it happened to anybody else, no, but it's release that, wait, I'm not alone in this, and others also feeling that they're not alone in this too as well.
Absolutely. And someone else understands what I'm going through.
Hmm
We have the writer's journey, and there is a lady who is in there who said that she sat on her story for 68 years because she was
Wow.
ashamed. She was afraid to share it. And when she started sharing it, others in the group related to what she
Mm,
went through. And they were
powerful.
able to come along and support her. And she stood on stage. We have an annual Powerful Journey Women's Conference. She stood on stage in April, and she stood there, she shared her story, and
Hmm
I could just see the freedom leaving her. And she also published her book, and now she's helping others that have gone through the exact same thing that she went through.
That's amazing. So she did not take that to her grave. Even at 68 years, she kept going. She kept definitely doing it for sure. So that is
Yes.
awesome. Okay, awesome. So I want to dive into this a little bit so we can get someone listening, they want to know like, hey, where do I first start? Where do I begin? Like, what's my step one? um they recognize they got a story. They're like, hey, I want to use this to help other people too as well. I can't hold it in anymore, and I don't want to hold it in. It's too much to hold in. It's better just to let it out. And there's a lot of movement in terms of mental awareness and mindfulness now, to where knowing that when we hold things in, whether it's something that's happened to us, whatever the case in, it just builds up in our body, and it's really healing to also release it. So what's step one? Where does someone begin on this journey?
Oh my goodness. Step one, and I'll get into that, but you just said healing, and writing your story, telling your story it's healing. It is a process of healing. The first thing to do is to do a brain dump. Just just start writing everything down. We'll talk about it a little later, but I have a blueprint that helps you to write your significant story. And we've gone through many challenges, many situations, and so many times people don't know which story to tell. And so
Mm.
the blueprint helps them to write down 3 different situations, 3 different circumstances that they've gone through. And so after you've done that brain dump and written out the story, then look at, what lessons did I learn from this? What did this teach me? I'll share with you, one of my books is entitled Brain Aneurysm, What Did You Come to Teach Me? I was
Mm.
diagnosed with a brain aneurysm back in 2020 and battled 81 days of dizziness. And through that
Wow.
time, I journaled as much as I could. And I ended up turning that into a book so that it can help someone else, the lessons that I learned by going through that process. So after you bring clarity and decide which lessons, which
Mm.
stories, then you look at the lessons that you learned. And then the third category is, what lessons can I teach others? What can they learn from what I've learned? And so at that point, Arfan, your story is no longer for you. It's for that other
Yeah, it's
person who
powerful.
is waiting for you
Mm.
to share your message. I often tell my clients to put an empty chair in front of you as you're writing, and
Mm.
picture sitting in that chair, that person who is going through what you went through. And they're
Mm.
sitting there with tears flowing down their eyes, saying to you, I need your story. I need to
Mm.
hear how God brought you through it. I need to hear the lessons that you've learned. I need to hear the lessons that you
Mm-hmm.
can teach me. Please
Mm-hmm.
write your story. Please write your book. Don't hold it in.
To hold it in. I love that. I want to back up for a second because you mentioned in 2020 you were done with 81 days of dizziness. Like that can almost be, or I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm misspeaking, but that can almost be crippling in a sense of how do you function day to day? How do you do things you normally would do, where it's just cooking or walking down the stairs or reading a book or something like that? What kind of impact and effect did that have on you during those 81 days? Like, I want to back up. Like, how did you discover it was aneurysm? Was it before or after dizziness, or where was this journey? Like, I would love to know a little bit
Okay,
more
you're
about
gonna
that.
love this story because this is how I came into full-time entrepreneurship.
Mm.
My 2 years before, I worked as a librarian at a school. Two
Okay.
years before this occurred to me, God had said, it's time for you to come home and go full time with
Mm.
Powerful Journey. But I had 2 years left before retirement. So I
Yeah.
came up with my own plan of spreading it over 2 years, how I was going to, get everything done that I felt that I needed to do. You hear all the eyes
Yeah.
that's coming
Yeah. Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
all.
so
Yeah.
my eyes got in the way of what God's plan was for me. So
Mm.
on December 20th, it was actually December 20th, 2019, that I went back to the library and the room was just spinning. It was, I couldn't
Wow.
stand. I made it to my desk, called the nurse over, and she had me to lay on the floor so that I wouldn't fall out of the chair.
Mm-hmm.
From there, they called my husband. We decided there was no way that he could take me to the hospital. They called an ambulance. So instead of me walking out 2 years prior, as God had told me to, I was carried out of that library on a stretcher. And
Wow.
it was during that time at the hospital in the emergency room that the doctors said it was vertigo and something had occurred in one of my ears. And then he
Mm.
said, oh, by the way, you have a brain aneurysm as well.
Hmm.
And this was at the beginning of COVID. So I had to wait to get into a neurosurgeon.
Yeah.
And during that time, I mentioned the 81 days of dizziness because I couldn't start physical therapy. Everything was almost shut down. And
Mm-hmm.
if you were not already involved in something, you had to wait.
I remember that time. It was tough
I
for a lot of people.
It was very tough. So my husband had to help me do everything.
Mm,
I most of my days were in bed, and some days in bed I still felt the room spinning. So it
mm-hmm.
was a very difficult time, but I will tell you, it was a time that I drew closer to the Lord. I was able to hear from him a lot better because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have all the distractions. And when I could journal, I did. And
Mm,
day after day, I journal and I journal the lessons that I was learning through all of that. When I was able to get into physical therapy, I had to depend upon people in my church's life group to come
mm-hmm.
and help carry me because my
Take you
husband,
there.
needed to do his duties as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so I went from what I'm very much an encourager. I'm a giver. I was not used to receiving. So
Mm,
it humbled me
mm-hmm.
because
I can
I
imagine.
had to allow people to come pick me up and drive me to appointments.
Wow. Wow. So the like after 81 days, like it was just a physical therapy and it got better and better and better along the way and slowly but surely.
It did get better, and then I was able to get into a neurosurgeon. We discovered that the brain aneurysm was very small, praise God,
Mm-hmm. Thank
and
God.
the risk to go in to remove it was greater than the risk to leave it alone. And
Mm,
so it's been 4 years now, and I go back every year for them to
mm-hmm.
measure it. And I believe in the power of prayer, and so do those
Yes.
around me.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
each time they go in, it has gotten smaller. I'm believing that one
Nice.
day they're going to say, it's not here. It's not there.
I'm gonna hold some belief for you too, because when you said that, the first thought that came to mind is that it's gonna be, what are you talking about? It's just
Exactly.
like if it was a different doctor, it'd be like, oh, what are you talking about? What's going on here? If it wasn't for any
Hmm.
previous records, they would have no idea it's there. So I'll claim that over you. Well,
Absolutely.
thank you for sharing that. I know we deviated a little bit, but I think it was also powerful because there's so many others who deal with sometimes like things that are just like a mystery or can potentially go 81 days of distance without even knowing it was an aneurysm or knowing the cause of it and just kind of trying to figure out like, man, why is my life all of a sudden turned upside down or spinning around and moving and trying to figure it
Well,
out.
I thank God for the dizziness because had I not had the dizziness, I could have been walking around with a
Mm,
brain aneurysm. And we've heard of people where they ruptured and
yeah.
they're no longer here.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually thank God for the dizziness because that's
Right.
what made them discover that there was even a brain aneurysm there.
Amen to that. Amen to that. That's awesome. Okay. So, um, this has been great so far. Again, did I say thank you already for joining me? I think I did.
You
But if I
you
didn't,
did, and
thank you again
I'm happy to
for
be here.
joining me. So I appreciate it so much. So we've gone through, you told us about doing the brain dump, right? Taking the brain dump. And you have a blueprint, which is going to be at phyllisjenkins.com, and someone could download
Mhm.
that, and we'll give an exact link, and I'll put a link in the description too as well. So do a brain dump, really look and see the lessons that you learn along the way, and then what lesson of those to be able to teach others, right? And I love this so far
Exactly.
because one of my favorite motivational speakers, Ed Milet, and I don't think he coined this, but he always says that you were most qualified to help the person that we once were, right?
Mhm.
And it's one of those things where I think a lot of this is echoing that in a sense, plus some. So I want to turn it back over to you. Please continue. Please let us know what's once we do this, where do we go from there?
After you have laid the foundation for your story, then it's time for you to start telling it. And there are many platforms, there are groups.
Mm-hmm.
We have a writers group that where they are not just releasing their stories, but they're turning them into books. I believe that you should leave a legacy of words. And
Mm,
for generations and generations and generations to come, I would give anything to have a book that my grandparents, my great grandparents had left behind with their stories.
mm,
What better way for me to get to know them better than to hear it from
mm-hmm.
them, their
Yeah,
stories that they went through? And so I truly believe in publishing your story so that it will be left behind, so that
mm,
others that that are coming behind you can
gotcha.
read your stories. We have in our writers group right now is Miss Ada, and Miss Ada is 84 years old.
84, how about
She
that?
84 years, and I should say 84 years young. She just published her second work with us, and she is in the writer's journey to write her next book. Miss Ada has 6 children. So I wish I had the number here, but I think it's like she has grandchildren, great grandchildren, great great grandchildren. And so
Yeah.
she is leaving a legacy for all of them.
That's beautiful.
And that's just, that's powerful because they get to read it in her words. And I
Hmm.
often say, if you don't tell your story, somebody else is going to tell it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I feel like sometimes I know, especially for me, and I've written a few small books and tons of guides, and I produce a lot of content, blogs, emails, things like that. But when it comes to a book, I sometimes feel like there's this an expectation or a pressure, so to say, of producing something that's of like substance of a certain length, or it's got to like fit like these check boxes and things like that. Can you correct me if I'm wrong? Am I having a bunch of misconceptions about this? Am I totally just going crazy? Is this a more simple process? Does it have to be like, does it have to be 250 pages or 200 pages or 180 pages or 85,000 words or some of these things that we hear sometimes?
I'm so happy you asked this question. I just had one of our authors to ask me the other day. I think she's at a little under 200 pages, and she's like, I don't know when to stop. I said, when you've said what you're going to say, stop.
Mm,
Don't keep going just to add more to it because it becomes fluff at that moment. And
yeah.
so when you've said what you're going to say, when you've taught what you're going to teach, and you feel that that reader will walk away with some valuable lessons, then you stop. And
Mm,
what we have learned in the last few years is that readers want smaller books anyway. They're not reading the 300, the 400 pages.
mm-hmm,
And another way for you to tell your story is through an anthology. And I'm going to hold this one up. This is volume 1 of our
mm-hmm.
Telling Our Stories anthology. And so each of the women that you see on this book has a chapter in the book. And
Gotcha.
so if you don't feel that you have enough to share in your own book, then become part of an anthology. That's how I became a published author. I am
Mm,
now, I've authored 7 books, but I've also co-authored 3 books and write in a chapter right now to go in someone else's book. So there are so many ways to get your story published. There's so many ways to to write. And
I'm really glad you mentioned that because I think every person right now could probably look around in their bookcase or just think about things they've looked at, and they probably have an anthology there somehow of where it's like a common like there's 10, I see 10 women on the cover of that of the book of your book there.
and
So
that's volume 1. We have volume 2. I'm working on
mhm.
volume 3 to publish later on this year. So yes,
Yeah.
become a part of
Mhm.
a collaboration of stories.
I think that's super encouraging. At least it's very encouraging for me because it just takes that pressure off. It's just, hey, if I can teach a concept or explain something in 30 pages, that's good enough. I feel like at
Hmm.
least that's my confirmation now. Like that's good enough. It doesn't need to
Hmm.
be drawn out or make extra long for whatever reason to check boxes or anything like that. I love that so much. That's it helps clarify a lot of questions. Okay.
Very good.
Um Okay, so I'm glad that you have a resource and the ability for other people to get guidance on this because going into writing a book alone, if especially if, a lot of us go on a journey and no one claims to be a writer. Like I don't ever claim to be a writer. Although I do so much writing, and when I get my Grammarly report, I'm like, I wrote that much words last week. Oh my gosh. I that was a book. That was a book almost right there. So
Mhm.
just knowing that you have a resource, and tell us again the name of, you said it's called the Writers Group. Is that correct?
It's the writer's journey.
Writers
And
Journey.
that is the writer's journey. That is our entry level uh, membership that we have. And then from there, we have our Authors Academy that
Mm-hmm.
opens, we have open enrollment for that one time a year. And that was in April. And so from the writer's journey, they go into the Authors Academy. From the Authors Academy, we have an annual Powerful Journey Women's Conference, and they take their stories to the stage and not the grave.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And then they sell their books. They launch their book sales at the conference. After that, we have the Next Steps program because they need to know, okay, so now I'm an author. How do I sell these books? What do I do next? And so we
Mm-hmm.
help them to build their brand, and many become entrepreneurs even after that. And then we have the sister authors mastermind that will start up in the fall. So they take a journey with us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that because like the thing you mentioned so far, brain dump, you think of your lessons, what can you teach others? You lay a foundation, you write a book, and we sit there, you try to write a book, and sometimes there's typically what would you say when someone's trying to when someone's going through the journey, like they do the brain dump, like someone goes through and they say, all right, cool, I'm gonna download your significant story blueprint. I'm gonna do the work there. And they get to a point when they finish that. What are some challenges they can probably expect to kind of come against? And what would you say would be like, some ways to overcome those challenges?
When you start writing your story, especially if you've gone through something dramatic,
Mm-hmm.
when you are writing it, you can expect that it's going to actually take you back to that
Mm,
point. And so be
really?
prepared to know that you're going to have some of those feelings again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a group comes in. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you are a part of a support group, that helps you through all of what you are going through.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can expect that you will have some of those feelings, but know that it's part of the healing process as well.
Mm-hmm. I love that you mentioned that because I find on the entrepreneur journey, one thing that I feel like I'll be as blunt and straight as I can. The entrepreneurial journey is challenging and difficult and hard, but rewarding, extremely rewarding. And a lot of what you're saying in terms of the writer's journey is I see a lot of crossover to where sometimes on an entrepreneur journey, like it things come up, like words that were spoken to us as kids, where it's like, wait a minute, like the not good enough, like why, who am I? Can I do this? And even asking for a certain prices. My employee used to being 20, 25, 30, $40 an hour. Then going to an entrepreneur where you're charging $500 an hour, $1,000 an hour, it can sound like, oh my gosh, how do I even say this? And you can get stuck, and it starts bringing up a lot of these like things where it's just like, am I, where is it going to be? So even looking at the book, like it takes you back to that situation, that challenge that you're writing about, um, doing that. So I see so much crossover in just like taking this journey. So someone who's taking a journey, they're writing a book and they're an entrepreneur. Um, do you have, or someone who's an entrepreneur and they're like, hey, I want to actually do more than just be an entrepreneur. I want to also leave a legacy. What kind of words of
Yes.
encouragement would you have for them to say, hey, you know, keep going or, to do this?
Once you step out and become an entrepreneur, once you step out and become an author, it's no longer about you. It's about
Mm,
those who are receiving. I was in a group last night where it was said that this person had a podcast and he decided he was going to quit because after so much time, he wasn't getting any more downloads, but he
Mm-hmm.
had quite a few. And my response was, so he's thinking about those that never came. What about
Mm.
those that are there and stayed? They were getting value from what you were
Wow.
sharing.
Yeah.
So I say that to you today. If you are an entrepreneur, if you are an author, it's not about you anymore. It's about those that you are serving, and
Mm.
serve them well, and remember your why.
I love that. I feel like you're speaking to me. I know we're doing an interview for others, but I feel like you're speaking. I'm getting a lot of this because I can so like just even to enforce that fact that you put on there. It's one of those things where I was doing a series of reels. I was doing reels for a while, and after a while, I was just like, huh, I'm not really getting the views that I really thought I was gonna get, and I stopped. And then randomly yesterday, someone commented on one of them. And this is something I produced last year, 13, 14 months ago. A comment said, and I looked at it, I saw the stats, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. When did that happen? How does this happen? All of a sudden, it's like a bunch of comments and likes I'm just not even aware of. So it's one of those things where it's a reminder to me, too, as well, to some of the things that I've just kind of put on the back burner because in the moment, it looked like I wasn't getting the results. It's not about me that if there is
Yes,
five, 600 people that watch that, that's still five, 600 people or so that've gotten value in this. That's a great reminder to me. Anyone listening right now is something where it can be challenging when we're on social media, when we're in business, when we're working with business coaches who are well-meaning, well-intentional, and they're pushing us to hit certain numbers to where you need a certain amount of leads or a certain amount of views or a certain amount of followers that it's it's what Phyllis just mentioned as far as like look at what you already have versus what you don't have and coming from that place of gratitude I feel plays a huge role in just being of service to others now knowing that hey God there's a situation I went through that challenge I've gone through but there's a bigger purpose for me now afterwards so I find a lot of encouragement in that so thank you for sharing that I really appreciate it.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to actually transition now because you gave us quite a bit here as far as like just brain dumping alone. I feel like that's a great first step for anyone here. If you've already written a book and you're thinking of writing another, or if you've given, we have a lot of entrepreneurs who we wrote books for a specific thing or like a tactical, like how to do this or that. Now we haven't necessarily shared our stories or our journey or things that the challenging things of our life that we may feel alone in. So download that guide and do the brain dump. That's something, and I would encourage everyone. I would love to get your opinion, but I would encourage everyone to take a deep moment when you do this, when you brain dump, to set the intention of what you're going to do, and for it not to just be a quick 2, 3 minute brain dump, because what you have, the story you have, you may not realize it now, but it's something that is impactful to other people. And I've been in groups where I was able to share my story and other people who resonated stood up. And it was like, whoa, I never realized that so much other people also went through trauma like I did at a young age. And when I looked around the room, I was like, wow, I'm really not alone. And it was something that was really powerful. But it was also extremely healing because for a large part of my life, I was going through and just kind of having flashes of these things happening. And from that moment on, the flashes changed from the actual trauma to the flash training of how I can start helping more and serving more.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I encourage you to download the Significant Story Blueprint, phyllisjenkins.com, PhyllisJenkins.com. Is that all they need? Do they need a slash something or just go there and it's going to pop
Once
up and
it Yes, and once they go there, look at the top, and they'll see it there.
awesome. Excellent. Well, I love this so much. Thank you so much for sharing that resource with us and also that the fact that you even have um a place for those who have a story who want to get support that way and
Mhm.
this is of like-minded people the group that you host that you help and support and I want to say one of the biggest things that I came across that I saw was that sometimes in order to do this we could brain them but you still need clarity and you still need guidance in order to do it. So that way it's not like you create a book and then it's, for lack of a better word, haphazard, and it just sits collecting dust on a shelf, which is nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But in my opinion, nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, we're doing this for others to get, right? So it's to give them the support in order to distribute this, publish it, and build an audience from it. Am I correct with
Right,
that?
because yes, there is something wrong with your book sitting there getting dust because someone needs to hear it. Somebody needs to read it. And so you have to get it. You have to get it out. I have a lady that's in our class now that wrote this book 12 years ago.
Mm,
But it was just a manuscript. So finally now she's doing something with it, and it is amazing what she wrote. And so I'm super excited. And then one of the other ladies said, I have a trunk full of manuscripts that where I just
wow.
wrote. And a moment ago, you said 2 to 3 minutes. No, it's 2 to 3 days, 2 to 3 weeks. It might even be 2 to 3 months as you are
Hmm.
downloading, dumping out because you don't remember everything in 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, and
My
that's what I was saying.
grandson,
Don't take 2 or 3 minutes. Take longer.
right,
That's what I
right.
was
It
saying.
it has to be longer. It has to be. My
Hmm.
grandson asked me a question the other day, and it took me back to something that happened when I was seventh grade. I forgot
Wow.
all about it until he asked that question. So as you are brain dumping, things will trigger and remind you of something else.
Hmm. Gotcha. What do you say for that? Because triggers can be crippling sometimes for some people, depending on the what that trigger is and the intensity
Mhm.
of the trauma. Or it doesn't matter if it's 50, 60 years ago. I think it's just, for even my case, traumas have happened 20, 30 years ago. It's still like it can be crippling. Someone going through this and just kind of knowing that they potentially will, they'll be triggered or so, even telling the story. How can they
Mhm.
approach it in a way where, I guess what I'm trying to ask is how can they approach it in a way where they feel they can still know that they might get triggered, but they still can continue without saying, okay, this is too much, it's too heavy, too deep. I can't do this.
You do it little by little. The woman that I mentioned that was reading the other night, Monday night, and she said, "Okay, I can't read anymore." I spoke with her after it was over to make sure she was okay, and she said, "As long as I'm writing it, I'm fine, but it's when I'm reading it that it
Hmm.
takes me back." And so what I would say to the person who is listening today or watching, when you have gone as far as you need to go, then stop. You can always come back.
Hmm.
But
Love
if
that.
it triggers it so much that you need help, go get help because there's
Hmm.
healing in the help. Help can be you sharing it with a confidant. Help can be you going to a professional to
Hmm.
share and get it out. But you will have healing as you are writing.
Hmm. I feel like there's someone who just needed to hear that, to know that
Hmm.
you can stop, you can pause,
Hmm.
you can
Yeah,
back away, you can get help, and you can come back. Right. So I think that's
exactly.
extremely helpful. Um, awesome. I love this so much, and thank you for the resource too as well to even get started. With that being said, though, for everyone listening right now who are like, hey, they want to learn more or potentially connect with you, what's the best place for them to go to connect with you to learn more about what you do and the different things you have available?
They can go to phyllisjenkins.com. You gave the spelling a moment ago of that, and I'm
Yes.
sure it will be in the show notes. At phyllisjenkins.com, you can sign up for my free weekly newsletter. And we send out words of encouragement, resources, tools, strategies, and stories on a weekly basis. Also, if you would like to email me, my email is phyllis@phyllisjenkins.com. I
Hmm.
answer all of my emails, and if we need to jump on a Zoom call together and discuss some things, I am so open to doing that as well. And Phyllis again is Phyllis, Jenkins, Jenkins.
Awesome. I love that so much. That's great. And I was looking at your website earlier, and all these resources are there in addition to some other places to go. So definitely check phyllisjenkins.com, download the Significant Story Blueprint, and then connect. Get your story out there. Your challenge is it can be turned into a life-changing message. Not only that, but you're able to build a legacy to pass down in a way where these stories are now immortalized in a sense, but more so in that they go down to your family who can actually get to know you a little bit more. I think of that when you mentioned it. I was like, oh, wow, she's right. I can actually share stuff that my grandchildren who, we never know what's going to happen. I don't know where my mind is going to be when I'm 80, 85, 90 years old, but I have my stories
Mhm.
that they can read and get to know, that they can get to know me, my children too, as well. And I
Yeah,
think
and
it's power in
even when
that.
we're gone to heaven, those great grands that will come along, they
Yes.
have a book that you have written with your
Hmm.
story in it.
I love that so much. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. The last thing I want to ask you before we wrap up is going to be again, a lot of those who listening are in that transition phase of they're still working a job, starting to go into business, and they want to make that transition. Something that you've done yourself. You've mentioned you've done it. Um, and it kind of had to in a sense, but nonetheless, what words of encouragement or advice would you give someone, or even if you would go back and give yourself when making that transition?
What I did while I was still working and had that income, regular income coming in, I was my normal job was on the freeway, but my business, Powerful Journey, was on the access road.
Hmm.
And so I would build you I say build up your side job, your entrepreneur, build that up while you're still working if you can. I used to stay
Hmm.
up until 2 o'clock in the morning and
Hmm.
working on Powerful Journey. And then I would go to bed and then get up and go and work as a librarian. And so uh, once I came home full time, then I just moved the Powerful Journey from the access road onto the freeway.
Hmm.
And so you have the foundation, already had clients, and
Hmm.
so you continue it. If you know that you know that you know that you know that this is what God has called you to do, let nothing stop you. Let nothing or no one stop you. And let me just
Hmm.
share, you cannot tell everyone your goals. You cannot share your dreams with
Yeah.
everybody.
Hmm.
It's best because God didn't give it to them, and they will sometimes talk you out of it. But
Hmm.
again, if you know that that's what you've been called to do, and you're helping others, remember your why. Always remember your why,
Hmm.
and that will keep you focused.
All right. Those are extremely wise words. And I love that analogy you gave too as well. One thing when I first started my journey, I heard it in a different way of if you're climbing a ladder and you're trying to now totally hop off that ladder and climb up a new ladder, it's extremely difficult and scary. But if you're building up two ladders and you have two ladders next to you, and you can just easily hop over when the time is right, it's more comfortable. It's not something where, so I actually love the analogy of the access road a lot better because I think it's actually a little bit more vivid and clear in my mind. So I'm going to steal that from you if you're okay with that.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
I will give you credit, of course, but I
Absolutely.
will use that from now on because I absolutely love that analogy. It's so true. And when you were talking about not everyone, you can't tell everyone your goals. It's so
Mhm,
true. There's a lot of people that are well-meaning, but they're often going to give you advice based off of their journey and their experience. Like for
mhm.
example, it's no surprise I have an advertising agency and we run Facebook ads. And you go and you tell some people I'm going to run Facebook ads. If you tell a room of 20 people, you're going to get a lot that are going to be like, "Oh yeah, I tried that, it didn't work." And you're going to get a handful of that's going to encourage you. But sometimes, depending on who you're talking to, that those words can become off as extremely discouraging. And you want to definitely thread carefully when you share your dreams because some people are well-meaning, they love you with all their heart, but they don't have the experience or knowledge, or they weren't even given, like Phil said, they weren't given that vision that you were given. And um, it could be a big roadblock along the way. So keep your goals that you have to yourself, and really when sharing it, kind of consider, who am I sharing this to, and
Yes.
what's going to be the fruit of that. And also, if you do share it to someone, and they come back and they're like, they tell you all kinds of stuff, look at the facts of it, because I think it's almost inevitable where someone's gonna give us some words of discouragement
But,
unintentionally.
but let that fuel you. Let that be the fuel that pushes you forward, and
Mm,
not put the brakes on, because that person didn't have the stretch mentality that is needed. I don't know if you hear that.
mhm.
It is hell in here.
No, no, I
So if
didn't. I
you're
don't
here,
hear
okay,
it.
good, good. I'm glad you don't hear it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's awesome. I love you mentioned that stretch mentality. That's something important to dissect. So there's been so much words of wisdom here today. I hope you all have taken a lot away, and I hope you're walking away encouraged to know that you can get some resources for free to get started. I think I lost Phyllis. She is having some inclement weather, so I did lose her. But we were just wrapped up here. So again, go to phyllisjenkins.com, download the significant story blueprint, connect with her, and stay tuned, because I'm going to transition. I'm going to give you my top takeaways from this interview. So again, thank you all so much for tuning in today, and we'll chat on the next one.